big event happening next week. I don't know if we're going to discuss it on this podcast, give you a little break from the news, but eager to hear everybody's thoughts. We've got Julian in the house co-hosting as well. What's up, Julian?
Hey, how you doing?
Julian, we talked about this big event that's happening. Everybody wants a distraction from it. I want to know, what is your hot take on daylight savings time? Are you pro daylight savings time or are you anti daylight savings time?
That's a really good question. I don't think I was expecting that question to start us off.
It's all anybody's talking about these days.
It is. No, I know we were talking about it. We had a conversation at work about this that unfortunately I did not get to look at, or else I probably would have an opinion. I think I'm for it. Because I don't know. I mean, it gives us more daylight. It gives us more sun hours, right? Because that's the correct way of phrasing that. So I think I'm for it. Yeah. How about you? What are your thoughts here?
I'm mostly of the same opinion. I think popular opinion has shifted a little too far into daylight savings time being actually bad. When in reality, I like being awake when it's daylight out. I think it's nice. There's nothing we can do to make more to tilt the orientation of the Earth. There's nothing that we can do to make more sunshine, at least that I'm aware of. So I might as well have more of those hours be during the day when I am awake rather than in the morning when I am asleep, or at night when I'm asleep. So I am pro daylight savings time. I want to hear what y'all think in the comment section. Are you pro or anti daylight savings time? What do you think about the hot topic issue of the day? And drop in any questions that you have about travel, about flights, about traveling during the pandemic. Whatever questions you got, drop them in the comment section down below to the side. We're going to try to get to as many as we can. As is SCF law, we have to answer the very first question no matter what. So let us know what is on your mind, and we're going to get to them. Julian, do we have any early questions yet, or are we still killing time?
We have one, but I did actually have a question related to your initial question, which is what are the arguments against daylight savings? Is it just the consistency across? Is it just
well, people hate I want to hear actually what folks, I can do my best to give a defense of the anti-daylight savings time opinion. I want to hear if there are any folks in the comment section, because I think that's actually the popular opinion. People say they don't like it. I'm never sure if they just don't like the fact that there are fewer hours of daylight happening because it's winter and we can't have as much daylight, and so that gets ascribed to this shift. I can understand a lot of people hating the sort of look, it's not easy always making this sort of 1 hour jump going from falling back, spring forward, fall back, falling back this Sunday. Not always easy, especially if you've got young kids like myself. It can be especially difficult. So I say this against personal interest, but in general, I don't know. I think it's kind of nice.
I feel like,
don't hate me for it.
I feel like it's one of those things where if you were part of debate club or debate team, they're always be able to argue the other side. If you love pizza, argue against why you think pizza is the worst. And that's why I was never good at that. I was just pizza's great. I can't debate that. And that was a good debate on the other side though, Scott.
Yeah, I grew up in a tiny town. We were so small. It was 3,500 people in my town. It wasn't even a town, it was a village. And because it was so small, there was no debate team. There was no fancy shit like that. I just grew up in small town Ohio, so I had to learn on my own how to debate small topics. Anyway, I'm sure people are sick and tired of hearing me rant about daylight savings time. Let's get to flights. Let's get to whatever questions folks have got.
Yeah, we have a few comments on daylight savings. I'll save that for a second.
All right.
First comment, I guess. Mazhar from YouTube says, "What's up, fellas?" So
what's up, Mazhar? How you doing, man? I like that. What is that? A roaring lion?
I think so. Yeah, that's pretty cool. First question though comes from our good friend Brian. Brian says, "Employer issue. Girlfriend put in for vacation 4 months ago, and it was approved 2 months ago when her employer found out we were going to Egypt. They are now saying they're revoking her vacation days that were previously approved. Oh, I guess this wasn't a question, but more of a comment, which kind of sucks. And then he says we were supposed to leave November 5th. I'm sorry to
Why
hear
do
that.
they care where you're going on vacation? That's so weird. Like, A,
Is that a
what
thing?
business is it of theirs
Yeah.
to be saying where you can and can't go on vacation? And B, why would they care in the first place? Um, Man, my sympathies, because that I don't know exactly who your boss or your company is. They don't sound so great to me. Yeah, that's dope, and it's a shame too because it seems like a really cool time to be able to visit in a place that oftentimes can get a lot of tourists, a lot of people, in a kind of packed location that probably isn't that right now given the pandemic. So, fingers crossed. Hope it works out for you.
Yeah. On another note, Brian says he's pro daylight savings just because it's better for people being out in more daylight during the daytime. I would highly agree with that. Pamela asks, London, what's your thinking flying from the USA, on a green card and a British passport?
um, I'm not entirely sure what the question is. It shouldn't I mean, right now, if you are an American and don't have a British passport, you need to have follow the 2-week mandatory quarantine for flying anywhere into the UK. If you have a British passport, I'm not 100% sure if that applies or not. I know if you're flying, for instance, to the EU, let's say you're going to France or Amsterdam or Milan or something. Uh, One of the only ways that you are allowed in the country if you're an American is if you either are a dual citizen or if you have family there, significant other, student visa, something along those lines. Most people are not permitted just if they don't fit into one of those categories. So if that's your question, uh, hopefully that's helpful. If there's something more specific, let us know in the comments, Pamela.
I On a similar note, actually, Kaylee asks if I am, and I actually don't know if I am both a U.S. citizen and a citizen of Ireland. Can I still fly to Ireland?
Yes, you should be able
Okay,
to. Ireland's part of the EU, shouldn't have an issue.
there you go. Perfect. And then we have a few comments on daylight savings. I feel like we have a theme going here, Scott. Nancy says it's just the change and the pets get confused. I can see that happening.
Yes.
Yeah. And then Brian says one bad example on daylight savings was when I was working from 11 to 7 when we fell back, and my employer only paid me 8 hours.
You're no, no. What is this employer, Brian? Man, they are. I'm gonna bite my tongue.
Yeah, and then Kathy says, I'd like to try keeping daylight savings time all year to see how that works, but otherwise, I'd rather have to change rather than not have it at all. Of course, that's easy for her to say now that she's retired. So yeah, there's another perspective for you. It's interesting seeing what everyone thinks. Matt, one of our go-to questions. Matt asks, do you think flight prices are going to be up or down next year?
It's a good question. So, relative to the long-term trend, I think they're still going to be way down. One of the confusing things that a lot of people think, or let me rephrase, one of the sort of assumptions that folks make if they haven't been paying much attention to airfare recently is to assume, oh, these cheap flights I'm seeing are only because of the pandemic. Cheap flights didn't exist otherwise. And as Scott's Cheap Flights members know, as hopefully most of the people watching here today know, that is absolutely not true. We have been living in what I call the golden age of cheap flights, and we've been living in it since 2015. It has been, never been cheaper in human history to be able to fly long haul flights as it has been over the past 5 years. So airfare, I still expect to be very, very cheap. But I guess if the question is like, how will airfare change once the pandemic is in the rearview mirror? The main changes I expect are sort of a reversion to normal with the rare cheap flights that we've been seeing this year. And so those rare cheap flights we've been seeing this year are the cheap flights in the middle of summer and those cheap flights around Christmas and New Year's. We almost never see cheap flights in a normal year at those times because they're some of the most popular times of year to travel, and so therefore some of the most expensive. Uh, because travel is so, the travel numbers are so depressed this year, we have seen more cheap Christmas flights in 2020 than we've seen for the past 5 years combined. And so I don't expect those cheap Christmas flights or those cheap middle of summer flights to continue once the pandemic is in the rearview mirror. I think that's going to be a sort of quirk of the pandemic itself. But in general, I don't expect that, cheap flights for the rest of the year. If you want to travel in May or September or most of the year, I don't expect that those are going to go away. To the contrary, I would expect them actually to possibly be even cheaper once international travel, especially starts to return, and airlines are able to kind of take all those planes that they have in storage right now and start to really fill their schedules back up. Anything I'm missing there, Julian? Any other thoughts?
No, for me, I think I split it up a bit into domestic and international. International, I mean, I definitely think we're going to be seeing other than what you were saying, the Christmas peak summer deals. But I think prices will definitely start to go back to the deals that we have normally seen kind of in the past 3 or 4 years. Domestic has been pretty cheap for the time being, especially coronavirus prices. And so, not that I think that they're going to really go up or go down as much, but I think we'll see it kind of stabilize into a more, instead of this week they're extremely volatile or extremely changing. It'll be a little more of kind of the more natural deals, and then here's a deal every month, every 2 months that we're seeing. So the timeline I think will be a little more consistent outside of coronavirus times with the prices.
Well put.
Um, Gay asks, is there any contract tracing back to airlines and flight numbers?
Hey, gang. Um, that's a good question. So there are a couple different ways to think about this. On the one hand, uh, as anybody who's kind of been following the virus situation in the US knows, there's not a whole lot of contract tracing happening in general. There's some in isolated pockets, but certainly not in any sort of widespread way. There's no national contact tracing plan or anything. That said, the US is only one of, I believe, 212 countries around the world. The vast majority of the people live outside the US, and some other countries are doing a lot better job on stuff like contact tracing elsewhere. And so, especially given that the coronavirus that we're in the pandemic that we're in right now is by far the most studied disease in recent human history. And so the fact is that even though there's not a ton of contact tracing happening on US flights, worldwide there is still a ton of study happening, a ton of examination, on these flights. How safe are they? Are people catching it? And the takeaway that I've sort of found from listening to the experts, from seeing what the epidemiologists and immunologists and virologists have said, is that airplanes are they're not zero risk. You don't have a 0% chance of contracting the coronavirus if you're on an airplane, but it's a lot lower risk than a lot of people might have assumed. They've done contact tracing. They've done a lot of studies. They've done models on how it might spread, and they found that the odds of contracting coronavirus on a pandemic seem to be basically lower than the odds of getting struck by lightning. And so, there is a greater than 0% chance of getting struck by lightning, but it's important to keep it kind of proportionate in your mind rather than letting it really feel like, oh my gosh, this is just a hermetically sealed germ trap that is going to be a super spreading event every time I get on. I mean, the fact is more than 1 billion people have flown on airplanes in 2020. If airplanes were super spreading events constantly, we would know about it. We would see it all the time. And the fact that we aren't, I think, indicates the level of risk there, even though it's important to remember that the risk isn't zero. And there are cases where people have caught coronavirus on airplanes. It just tends to be much more sporadic and much rarer than we might have assumed. I hope that answers your question, Gay. I mean, there's not like super systematic contact tracing back to airlines and flight numbers. There might have been a bit more early on in the pandemic. I just don't, I wouldn't expect that if you fly and they find out 2 weeks later that one person on that plane might have had it, that you would expect to be contacted by an official. But that's largely in part because in the US, unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of contact tracing infrastructure in place in general.
Yeah, that's true. Moving forward, Pamela asks, do you think they're going to have a mandatory vaccine to fly in the future?
My guess is that once the vaccine is shown to be safe, effective, and it's widely distributed, you are either going to have to show proof of vaccination, or you're going to have to show a negative COVID test, maybe even closer, maybe even within the past like 24 hours, something, once we have much more testing infrastructure and it's easier to get a test. Like, will this be forever in the future that you have to do this? Maybe not, but I would imagine at least for the next like 3 to 5 years, while folks are still sort of like trying to stamp out coronavirus, while it's still a recent memory, I would expect that this will be a something that is a requirement, either a negative test or proof of vaccination, because airlines obviously want to make sure that they're mitigating the spread as much as possible, both for customers and for their own employees, for pilots and flight attendants. But also, I mean, as importantly, trying to make sure that people have confidence that getting on an airplane isn't going to get them sick. That traveling in an airport isn't going to put their health at risk. And I don't know about you, I feel a lot safer and a lot more confident if I feel like everybody around me, I know that they are, not contagious, or that they're not sick, or the like. And so, obviously, a vaccine requirement would be one way for airlines to get there.
Yeah, that and like what you were saying, like the rapid testing, or just building up the testing infrastructure so
Yeah.
that it's a lot more accessible, I think will play a big factor as well. Brian from earlier, he said, we are in Florida, which is a hotspot, and Egypt is not. So I don't, yeah, the situation with not being able to go, that sucks. Sorry to hear that, Brian.
So weird.
It's definitely a weird one. Two questions that I'll kind of combine together. One is Justina's questions of, are the European nations accepting international travel? And then Bobby asks, any idea when travel to Portugal will open up?
In general, Europe is not accepting American visitors. There are a few countries that are, Turkey, Croatia, a few other countries in the Balkans. Excuse me. But in general, unless again you are a dual citizen, have a student visa, a family member there, or a significant other, maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend in Europe, then you're allowed to visit. Or if it's also important to note, or if you're just transiting. So let's say you're flying to Turkey and you have a connection in Paris, you are allowed to connect in Paris. But again, it has to be a single itinerary. You can't buy a flight to Paris and then a separate flight on to Istanbul. When will travel to Portugal open up? I mean, I think I would expect that Portugal will open up at the same time as the rest of Europe does. And right now, the trend is in the wrong direction. If you've looked at the recent case counts in Europe, it's not good. It's not good. It's not good in the US either. And so I wouldn't expect this to happen in the next couple months. I think there was a lot of hope early on. Rewind a couple months ago, it looked like Europe had really gotten it under control. They were opening up a lot of internal borders. Now it's not looking very promising. I mean, their case counts are shooting up. It's going to be the type of thing that I suspect we're on a trajectory where the vaccine is going to be the thing either a vaccine and or significant rapid testing combined with the fact of bringing case counts significantly down is going to be the thing that opens up, or a vaccine. Otherwise, when that's going to be, it's hard time seeing it before, say, like March or April. I mean, I think we're looking at least another 4 or 5 months out into the future. Hopefully, fingers crossed, things improve quickly enough that it's going to be earlier. And remember, if you do have flight bookings, that flights dates can be changed without any penalty. So you do have that flexibility. But I'm not short-term optimistic for flights to Europe, unfortunately.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. I think it's what you're saying, that a vaccination is gonna be probably be one of the major steps. I mean, we were hoping, I guess, the numbers were going to go down enough so that travel and all that was going to start opening up. But you're right, with the rising numbers, it's tough to say anytime soon. Um, and going into that, one of the messages we hate the most to see, Kelly says, "I was supposed to leave for Ireland tonight. I'm so bummed. Sorry to hear that."
Man, yeah. Gosh. The I was supposed to visit the France for the first time this summer. I know, like my undying shame as a traveler is I'd never been to Paris, and I was gonna fix that this summer. I had the flights booked. I was planning to go, and then of course, I got waylaid. What was the trip that the pandemic put on hold for you, Julian?
It was Spain and Portugal. Spain and Portugal. I was supposed to go in March, March or early April. I think one of those.
Hmm.
And yeah, that was my trip. So not too happy about that.
Curious to hear in the comments section, what are the other trips that folks heard from? Ireland, Spain, Portugal, France. What are the other
Yeah,
ones that folks had to delay because of the coronavirus? Hopefully not cancel. Hopefully we're all going to get to them once things look better.
yeah. You brought up a good point though, that I've always found interesting, where you say it's surprising that Scott from Scott Sheet Flights has never been to France. And I feel like there are a few of these destinations that are like, oh, you travel all the time. I'm surprised you've never been to, blank. You've never been to France. For me, I've mine has always been Amsterdam. I feel like a lot
Mm.
of people I know, a lot of travelers in general, have gone to Amsterdam, and I've never been. But yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, drop in the comments. Is there a destination that you think is kind of weird, that maybe a well seasoned traveler, or Scott from Scott Sheet Flights, has not visited and probably should visit? So, anything else on your list there, Scott, that you think would be surprising, that a well seasoned traveler hasn't been to?
Um, I've well, I'd never been to Cancun until the Scotchy Flights team did a company
Right.
retreat there
Uh-huh.
last year. Never been to Bangkok. I feel like
Yeah.
most people have been. I've been all around Southeast Asia, just never made it to Bangkok or Thailand in general. So
Mhm.
Thailand and France are the two, and then Australia and New Zealand I've never been to. At least I have the excuse that they're like super far away.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are another couple ones just never made it to. I'm gonna. They're not going anywhere. I
Yeah.
got
Exactly.
time.
Yeah, yeah. We'll get there. I think Southeast Asia is a good one. I think not just Thailand specific, but just in general. Like, oh, I've been to Southeast Asia, like some part of it. And I also have. Well, I guess you have, but I haven't been to anywhere there yet. So that's
Where else are people saying that they had canceled from COVID?
um a few. Dawn says Hawaii, which sucks.
Mm.
Allison, ooh, hey Allison, canceled or rescheduled. Oh, I know she has a lot.
Oh my goodness.
Japan,
Oh,
France, Portugal, Brussels, London, Amsterdam, Budapest, Prague, and Vienna this year. It's been a crappy year. Yeah. Lisa says Italy. Um, Barry says cancel the trip to Australia.
mm.
Um, Mine was Pamela says mine was Jamaica in April for her 50th birthday. Yeah, there's a lot of them over here. So
The thing I keep coming back to is like, look, we all, had these trips we were planning to. 2020 was going to be a huge year for travel. Um, Even though our plans got a little waylaid, I feel like most of us still have those travel dreams. Most of us still have those places we want to go. Even if it wasn't this year, we've got all that pent up hunger, that thirst to travel. And so it's going to be interesting, once there's a vaccine, once people start to feel comfortable and safe flying again, once those borders open up again, feeling like, where are all the places we're going to go, make up for lost time, take all these trips that we had planned to, and have spent the entire pandemic dreaming, oh, I can't wait to go visit Greece, I can't wait to go back to Japan or Australia or Jamaica.
Actually, funny thing, you bring up Greece. Arturo asks, Scott, have you ever been to Greece?
I've actually been to Greece a couple times. I am a huge fan of Greece. Athens, incredible city, loved it, loved, just cannot tell you how much I loved it. I also went super randomly and was a guest speaker at a Dockers event in Greece once a couple years ago. I live a weird life, let me tell you. Like I had this weird side gig as a pants model.
Mhm.
Me, can you
I
believe
can
that?
I can confirm
So
that, yes.
and it took me to Greece, which was great. And I was able to finagle a flight for my wife as well, so we could go and enjoy it together. So I highly recommend it. Loved Athens, loved the Greek islands. I would say I liked, but didn't love quite as much Thessaloniki. And then down in the like Hakadiki, I think, gosh, what are they called? The finger? I forget. Anyway, beautiful area. I know you've been to Greece as well, Julian. Any recommendations other than Athens?
I've only been to, or I was younger when I went to more places, but really from what I remember, it's mainly Athens and Santorini. Highly recommend both. Again, I mean, I've said this so many times. I travel mainly for food, and I truly love the food in Athens. I thought it was amazing. Um, so yeah. Greece is actually pretty high on my list of places that I've been to and I'd love to return to.
Mm.
Not that I don't think there's anywhere on the list yet of places I've been to that I wouldn't want to return to, but Greece is high on that other list.
My running theory
Hmm.
is that people's 20s are for exploring, trying out all new places. People's 30s are for going back to all the cool places, your favorite spots from your 20s.
Oh,
I don't want to dox you right now, Julian. I know
yeah.
I don't want everybody to know exactly how old you are, but I can see, at some point going to get close to that 30 style where you're starting, go back to some of those favorite places rather
I
than
mean,
somewhere new.
I think you're right. I think I'm slowly that's what it is. I'm slowly getting into that. Because yeah, you know the place well. You know the places that like food that you like or the views, and panoramas and all that stuff that you really loved. So you kind of go back and you enjoy that. So I can see that. I think that's probably a pretty accurate theory. Um, Barry says, "Love the destination of the week article." That's awesome. I feel like we've gotten a good amount of feedback on the destination of the week article and on our newsletters in general. So I'm really happy to see
That's
that.
thank you, Barry. I appreciate that. And B, let us know where else you are interested in us profiling.
Yeah.
What destinations do you kind of want to hear more about? Which ones do you have in mind? Oh, yeah, I want to hear more about, Thessaloniki. Oh, I want to hear more about, I don't know, Mumbai or Moscow or somewhere. Let us know where you would be interested in. We will take requests. I can't promise we'll take every single one, but it's not entirely scripted out. We're open to peer pressure.
That is true. That is for sure true. Um, and then question from Pamela again. Ooh, perfect. Pamela asks, are international flights any different in terms of a risk as domestic flights? Any differences?
I'm presuming we're talking about COVID risk here,
Mhm.
and there are a couple different things that I would weigh out in my mind. Um, I don't think it's as simple as being able to say international or domestic. The let's talk about aggravating and mitigating risk factors. So something that makes a flight riskier would be if you are on a very small plane. So some of the regional jets, think ones that are like fewer than 50 seats, some of them don't have the HEPA filters on board. Almost every airplane that's at least 50 seats or more, basically, every 737, every A320, A21, I don't know, almost every plane that we fly is large enough that it has one of these HEPA filters on board that constantly cleans the air, 30, 40 times an hour, and makes it far safer than it would be otherwise. But if you're flying, a puddle jumper from, I don't know, let's say Portland to Seattle, it might be a small enough plane that there's not a HEPA filter on board. So that would be maybe a little bit riskier. At the same time, you don't have nearly as long in the sort of close proximity. Everywhere, you're required to wear a mask either way, so that shouldn't be any different. A nonstop flight is going to be safer in a sense than a connecting flight, not because the connecting flight is bad, but because, well, two reasons. One, you have two different sets of people that you would be in close proximity with, one for the first flight, one for the second flight. But more importantly, you have the connection, and a lot of the sort of infectious disease experts say the plane itself not nearly as risky as a lot of people might think, but the airport might be a little bit riskier, whether that's people congregating at the gate or at restaurants or in, lounges or somewhere. And so if you've got, 4 or 5 or 6 hour layover, it could be more of a risk factor than if you have a nonstop flight and you just get to where you're going immediately. So those, are some of, obviously, like, even though it's a very low risk of being on a plane to contracting coronavirus, obviously it's a little bit different if you're on for 10 hours rather than like 2 hours. 2 hours, of course, is going to be a little bit less risky than a much longer flight. So those are the different factors that I would be thinking about, rather than it just being international is riskier than domestic or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's exactly my thoughts as well. Arturo from earlier says, "A wife and I are curious about going to Greece. Thanks for the info. Pants model. Nice." So there you go.
It's true. It's true. I can't pull it off anymore. This was in my youth. Doctors will not accept me as a pants model anymore, sadly.
And then we have a few more, unfortunately, cancellations. Daniel says, "I had plans for Berlin in May and June for the first time." And then Justina says, "Love Denmark and Sweden." I do like this message from Arturo that I'll put on the screen quickly, and then we'll go into our last question, Scott. He says, "Though my plans were canceled this year, we are definitely ready to travel in 2021." And I think that's a good summary of kind of all of us right now.
Yeah, I think that's a widely held sentiment.
All right, final quick question for you, Scott. Barry asks, "How should I contact you with ideas for destinations of?"
Ooh, email us, support@scottscheapflights.com. Let us know both your feedback in general and if there are specific places you'd like to see us profile. Like I said, I can't promise that we'll get to them right away, but we love the input, and it definitely feeds into our thinking of where we are going to be profiling next.
Yeah.
So
perfect.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for your great questions. Before we wrap up, I imagine you all are already super engaged, super with it. We talk about the most important item in the news right now, daylight savings time. There's another really important thing in the news, the election next week. Please, please, please vote if you haven't already. Please make sure that you are tracking your ballot, trying to find both the safest and most efficient way to vote as possible. Incredible stakes in this election. We're really excited for everybody to be able to get out and vote. So thank you all for doing that, for doing your part to help our democracy, and appreciate you all so much as always. Love to see the questions. Love to see the enthusiasm for travel. We will be back. I think not next week. We're going to take next week off. Like I said, Election Day is actually a holiday here at Scott's Cheap Flights. We not only give the day off so everybody can go vote and volunteer if they want and are able to as poll workers. There's a poll worker shortage, and we want people to again help make the gears of democracy work as well as they can. So that's an important thing for us here at Scott's Cheap Flights, and we hope that it's going to go smoothly as possible. So we're not going to be here next week. We will be here in 2 weeks though to see where we are in the world of travel and take your questions again.
Yeah,
that's about it for us. Thank you, Julian. Thanks